Campaign 2022 enters the home stretch. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. Just more than 5 weeks remain in the 2022 campaign. The race for U.S. Senate remains very tight. Democrat Tim Ryan and Republican J.D. Vance are tied in recent polls. Donald Trump Jr. was in Ohio this week campaigning with Vance. They visited with local police unions. The Associated Press reports while Tim Ryan criticizes J.D. Vance for not doing enough to help the opioid crisis, Ryan has accepted some $27,000 in donations from opioid makers and distributors. $27,000 is a very small percentage of the tens of millions of dollars Ryan raises, but Vance's campaign calls it hypocrisy. Joe Mas, is it a little bit of hypocrisy to take drug money from companies and then criticize them for the opioid crisis?
Yeah, in my business, we don't consider that to be drug money. But nevertheless, that is a tiny, 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 tiny amount. I was thinking about this, and it's about the amount that I think that local attorneys over a 10-year period might donate to judicial campaigns. Yeah. So the amount, and the question is not whether you accepted money. Over time, some of it possibly even before the crisis became known, but what did you do in return? And I don't see that Tim Ryan did anything in return as a consequence of those very small donations.
Mike, on a doc, J.D. Vance running law and order campaign. He's got a new ad out, but the two ads before that focused on law enforcement and accusations that Tim Ryan is voted or supports defunding the police. Yeah. Is that the winning ticket for him?
It sure is. According to all the polls, independent polls, crime, the economy, and inflation are top of mind issues for voters in Ohio and across the country. And he was at an FOP lodge there. They have endorsed him. Law and order, law enforcement is behind J.D. Vance, that is. You know, back to the campaign contributions, $27,000 is a lot of money to the average Ohioan struggling to afford a gallon of gas. And at the end of the day, I was on the show a couple weeks ago, Mike, and the panel then criticized J.D. Vance because a doctor he found to help women in southern Ohio with the opioid crisis got a check or two from the drug company too, and you know there was all this teeth gnashing at the time. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. It is hypocritical for him to take that money. He shouldn't have taken it.
Laura, this shows the whole thing with campaign finance. I mean, you accept money from a lot of organizations, and some of it comes back to, you know, not haunt you, but you open yourself up for criticism if you've taken money from certain groups. Well,
I'd like to point out that the $27,000 came from between 2007 and earlier this year. So that's a long window right there. And that's out of about $50 million that he raised during that time. So it is a very small fraction. And a chunk of it came from the PAC run by Cardinal Health, which is an Ohio-based company. Now, Ohio-based companies often support Ohio-based candidates for office. So yes, there's an element of hypocrisy, but it seems pretty tiny.
Joe Mas, what about Tim Ryan continues his Trump Democrat theme, for lack of a better description, for his campaign?
Yeah, exactly right. And I don't know that I would call it a Trump Democrat theme, but it certainly is.
Footballs at TV that say defund the police. That's pretty Trump.
Listen, I think that there is no question that there are folks that Democratic candidates lost back in 2016, that candidates wisely are trying to say, time out, guys, come look at us again for the following reasons, because we're there to watch your back with respect to economic issues, and that we're there to protect your union membership and so on. And that is what Tim Ryan is doing. And he has been consistent in that during his time in Congress and even before.
Yeah, the neat thing is that on Monday of next week, we're going to have the debate. And I think a lot of people are going to turn in to see the spotlight's going to be on the two Tims. You know, the 30-second TV commercial Tim that says I voted with Trump on this, that, and the other. And then the real DC Tim that actually votes 100% of the time with Joe Biden and the economy that we have today. So J.D. Vance's job on the debate on Monday is to point out and focus on the Tim Ryan who he wants everyone to think he is versus the Tim Ryan who he really is.
Early voting begins on Wednesday, Laura. Early voting is key for get out the vote efforts. We have seen the two candidates' campaign strategy as far as ads and appearances and surrogates. We don't know a whole lot about the two candidates' get out the vote efforts. What are we looking for there, do you think?
Well, you're right. Early voting starts on Wednesday. The deadline to register to vote in Ohio is on Tuesday. So if people are not registered yet, get on it before Tuesday or by Tuesday. And we do know that early voting captures about a third of voters, maybe a little bit more post-pandemic, do vote absentee in Ohio, so it's pretty crucial. I haven't heard any specifics, but I do think that that's any get out the vote effort and plan has got to have the early vote.
Mike, some Republicans criticized J.D. Vance for his sort of TV silence in the months after the primary, while Tim Ryan was all over TV. Some Republicans were uncomfortable with that strategy. Are they worried that J.D. Vance, a first-time candidate in Ohio, will not have the organization needed to get votes out?
Well, we'll see. I think there's some criticism he deserves, J.D. Vance and his campaign, the people around him, for not being more aggressive in the summer months, allowing Tim Ryan to identify and define who he was, at least, or he claims he is. So I don't think it's too late, though. He was well-funded, as we know. Peter Thiel's money and other donations have come in. But it's going to be a red wave year, Mike, so I think he'll be able to ride that wave and get across the finish line.
Joe, Hispanic voters, a lot of talk, a lot of reporting in recent weeks about how they're, surprise, surprise, they're not a monolith. There are conservative Hispanics and liberal Hispanics. I don't want you to, of course, speak for the entire population, but how are Hispanics viewing this election?
I think they're viewing it like everybody else is. However, some data is really kind of interesting because I think some focus has been put on the fact that since the Trump era, there has been some little gains on the part of particularly male Hispanics. But it's nothing compared to, for example, the 44% that George W. Bush received in his campaign, or the 37% that Mitt Romney did. So in fact, what happened is that they lost a bunch of Hispanics. Now they're gaining a few back. But as far as there be conservative Hispanics, I have always said that we Democrats need to be sure and be there for the Hispanic community, because otherwise we're going to lose them.
Okay. Next topic, the issue of abortion hangs over the election. Hundreds of abortion rights opponents rallied at the State House this week to call for even tougher restrictions than Ohio's current 6-week ban. Governor DeWine seems to be downplaying his opposition to abortion rights in the campaign. With little fanfare and no public announcement, the governor unveiled a major initiative to help low-income mothers and their babies. It's called Bold Beginnings. It calls on the legislature to expand Medicaid eligibility to more pregnant women and children. It asks lawmakers to extend paid maternity leave for state workers. The state would seek federal approval to expand access to housing. If lawmakers approve, the state would eliminate sales taxes on baby items like diapers, wipes, and car seats. Critics who support abortion rights welcome the proposal, but they question the timing in the final stretch of the campaign in which DeWine faces questions about his strict anti-abortion rights stance. The governor's spokesman says the governor has been considering the proposal for some time. Mike Gonidakis, if he has been considering the proposal for some time, and these are not new problems faced by low-income mothers and their babies, why did he unveil it 6 weeks before the campaign and not before the election and not 6 months before the election?
Well, there's never a wrong time to do the right thing, of course, but he's not a king. He can't just do this on his own. First of all, some of it he needs Joe Biden and the federal government to approve, expanding some TANF dollars and other things. Then he needs a legislature who's on break until after the election. So whether he would have announced this in June or now, he still needs action from the legislative branch and the federal government. Look, Mike DeWine has a long history and record of supporting pregnant women, babies, both born and unborn, and this is just yet another common sense approach. Look, as you said, we're going to eliminate taxes on diapers, formula, car seats, cribs, things that, my kids are a little bit older today now, but they have a lot of money back in the day, and they're more money now, unfortunately, because of inflation. These are common sense approaches. Even the Democrats said, and I think they came kicking and screaming that these are good ideas, but again, of course, they play politics and criticize them for other things. These are good ideas across the board, whether you're Democrat or Republican, to help low-income women.
Laura Bischoff, you're a veteran of the Medicaid expansion wars from the Kasich administration. The legislature was not too keen on that. In fact, Kasich went around them. Are they going to expand Medicaid even for this population?
Well, I think that this is politically palatable for Republicans. They want to see, they want to be able to say, okay, yes, we oppose abortion in all circumstances except for life of the mother, but we're going to offer help to young families and women. And also, this is a much smaller expansion than the Medicaid expansion under the Kasich administration, for sure. And, I would say that, these tax breaks on baby items, et cetera, it's it's almost a token because, I mean, it costs $300,000 to raise a kid to 18. So, you know, getting a tax break that saves you $70 a year on diapers is, I mean, every bit adds up, but still.
Joe, so is this symbolic or is this real help?
I think it's both, and I think Mike is correct that Democrats are not going to come out and criticize. I think we're going to criticize the timing, and even in that sense, I'm not sure it's going to have much of a political impact or impact on the elections anyway. But I will be the last person in the world to say that as a consequence of that, then we're going to oppose it for some reason. I think it's terrific that there are some initiatives to help a lot of these folks being single moms and people that need the money, need the assistance. So that's fine. And I think they'll have support, bipartisan support on that.
Laura, looking at the enthusiasm surrounding this issue, if you look at the polls, economy is number one. It always is number one, but it's at like 27% is the most important issue. Number two is threats to democracy, surprisingly, at 20%. Abortion is third in the last poll released publicly here in Ohio. It's at 13%, far less than the economy, but 3 or 4 times greater than it was 4 years ago. Who is making up that 13% that is now labeling that as their most important issue?
I think it's probably women of childbearing age would be my guess. I think that the reason why it has risen to number 3 is because of the Dobbs decision. It has actually put abortion front and center in the minds of a lot of voters.
Now, Mike, there was a lot of people at the State House, a large crowd. It shows that there is still some enthusiasm there. Do you think, how much of that 13% who say this is number one is conservatives who oppose abortion rights?
It's hard to say. You know, polling on abortion is really tricky because if you tell someone says they're pro-life and then you ask them specific questions, then it dilutes it. Or if they're pro-choice, you ask them specific questions.
It was pretty simple.
Yeah.
What is the most important issue? And 13% chose abortion.
Well, here's what I know, Mike. It's an important issue to people that are pro-life and those that are ardent pro-choice supporters. It's important to them. It always is, regardless of the year. But here's the thing that keep in mind. Every poll demonstrates that Mike DeWine is winning by double digits. He signed the heartbeat bill. He continues to support pro-life initiatives, continues to support Ohio Right to Life, and he's still winning by 10 points. If all the new voters, I've read some articles that there's new voters in Ohio that have registered in the past couple months, if 100% of them vote for Mike DeWine's opponent, he still wins. So at the end of the day, if it's third, fourth, or second on the list, the economy, as you said, Mike, is still number one.
Well, when people go to the polls, Joe, they're not voting for Mike DeWine just on one issue.
No,
Some
they're
are,
not.
but most
and
are
he
not.
still, I think he has some residual support from his handling of the pandemic from 2020. But let me suggest a couple of things here that need to be thrown into the mix. One of them is the issue of polling. I think polling is becoming more and more difficult. I believe in statistical sampling. I believe in polling. The problem is that the landlines that were traditionally used are not there anymore. I don't know about you, but I don't answer everything that comes to my cell phone. In addition to that, we have had an explosion in the registration of women, many of them, they say, young women in the state of Ohio, second only in the nation to Kansas. And of course, we know what happened in Kansas with respect to their constitutional amendment with respect to privacy. Yeah. So we've got that issue. 90,000 new voters have been registered and who are women in the state of Ohio, 6.4%.
Perhaps the most crucial races on the ballot are not for governor or U.S. Senate, but for Ohio Supreme Court. The next court will try to settle the redistricting controversy if lawmakers agree to abide by its orders. And the state's highest court could rule on abortion restrictions. There are 3 races on the ballot. The top job is open because Maureen O'Connor is aging out. Current Justices Jennifer Brunner and Sharon Kennedy want to be Chief Justice. 2 Republican incumbents face challenges. Pat Fisher faces State Appeals Court Judge Terry Jamison, and Pat DeWine faces another appeals court judge, Marilyn Zayas. Laura Bischoff, it's hard to gauge where voters stand on these issues, but these are really crucial races that voters will decide.
Yeah, we did a poll, USA Today, Suffolk University did a poll a couple weeks ago, and it found that not only is the J.D. Vance, Tim Ryan race really close, but these 3 races are very close. And there's a couple of things that are going to be different this year. We're going to have party affiliation after the name of the justice candidate, and these races are going to move up the ballot. So voters will, maybe they won't have as much fatigue by the time they get to the judicial candidates. I think that the Supreme, people have been paying more attention to the Supreme Court because of abortion and redistricting than they have in the past. So it's really interesting. Now the balance of the court is 4-3. O'Connor is sort of a swing vote, but it's 4 Republicans, 3 Democrats. The GOP has controlled the majority of seats on that court since 1986, and this is the first chance for the Dems to swing that. And it hinges not on who wins the Chiefs race, because O'Connor leaves and Mike DeWine will backfill either Brunner or Kennedy's slot with another Republican. Instead, it hinges on whether or not the 2 appellate judges, Jameson and Zayas, if either one of them can pick off a Republican from Cincinnati named Pat DeWine or Pat Fisher.
Pat DeWine certainly has good name recognition because his dad is the governor, of course, and he is a sitting justice. Pat Fisher, sitting justice, not the same ID, but still better than his opponent. Can those 2 challengers with limited name ID win?
They can, for the simple reason that of what Laura just said, that for the first time ever in Ohio history, we're going to have the D of the R next to it. And if
that helps the Democrats?
It helps the Democrats, in my opinion, as a consequence of what I said just a couple of minutes ago, that we have had an increase in the number of registered voters that are more than likely, in my opinion, going to be supporting Democratic candidates. That may not be the case on, for example, I have a friend running for the Court of Appeals over in Licking County, those counties there, that particular district, and that may not be the case. But statewide, I think that we have a chance. And by the way, the difference is between 2 and 3% on each one of these, not just the Chief Justice. And by the way, as the senior member of the panel, let me object to the term aging out.
Well, she is aging out.
Let's just say that
She's
there's
turned
a
70.
legislative
That's not that old.
limitation.
She's aging out of that position. I'm
Well,
not saying
I
she's
don't know.
old or too old. Anyway, it's just tight writing, Joe.
stand
That's all it
on the
was. Tight writing. Mike, I assume you disagree that the R is going to make a difference.
It will. I respectfully disagree with my colleagues here on the panel. Joe, is that because gas is now over $4 a gallon. Again, on election day, it'll be close to $5 a gallon. This is a midterm election. We know what the history books tell us on midterm elections. People are upset. They're going to take their R ballot and go in. And on the other side, there's no enthusiasm for Democrats, regardless of 90,000 people that may have registered to vote. 6 million people voted at the last presidential election here in Ohio. According to the polling, Nam Willie's name ID, who's running for governor, is in the 30s with Democrats. There's no enthusiasm. Republicans are enthused. Independents are all breaking for Republicans. They're going to go R down the
what Joe
ballot.
is saying about all these women voters who have registered. There is a lot of anger about the Dobbs decision. There is some anger about guns. There's a lot of concern about the election deniers. This is not a standard midterm election. Would you agree?
I think it is, and here's why, Mike. So every woman in Ohio is not pro-choice. We mentioned moments ago the march we had, and I was there on Wednesday. In my opinion, we had close to 3,000 people there. There was probably way more women than there were men there. So this fallacy, now maybe there's a lot more women in Columbus and the campus of Ohio State that are pro-choice and pro-life, but to say, well, more women are registered to vote, so therefore the Democrats are going to, that's not fair to say.
Do you
it's not
think all of the
statistically
women at that
possible.
rally had already been registered to the vote, or they newly registered this cycle?
I don't know because we didn't ask, but I mean, tremendous number. If you just look at the pictures that independent media put on, it's all women, girls, teenagers. They come from schools and colleges. It's awesome. It was a great event.
Joe?
Well, I just wanted to say that the impact of culture and religion is the one that really supports the folks that are on the pro-life side. But one interesting thing that's happening, Mike mentioned about people in Columbus, maybe students at Ohio State or whatever, being the one who registered to vote and support the Democrats. One of the interesting things is that the rural areas of Ohio have been losing voters to the cities. And as a consequence of that phenomenon, and there is another phenomenon, that is that you tend to vote like the people around you. So I do think that we stand a chance to go against trends this year.
I also think that $5 gas versus abortion, people are going to be voting when they're checking the box for the Supreme Court candidates. Abortion is going to be more in front and center in their minds than how much they paid in gas to get to the polls.
Yeah, it's a tricky election to figure out. A lot of variables here, many more variables. And as Joe, you mentioned the polling, you just wonder how accurate it is when you see results from Brazil where that The candidate was way under in the polls and almost won. Anyway, our last topic. The Ohio Secretary of State's office wants to set up a team to investigate election and campaign wrongdoing. Secretary of State Frank LaRosa's Integrity Squad would look for election fraud, data breaches, abusive robocalls, and even campaign finance problems. LaRose says there is a crisis of confidence, and the unit is designed to take those concerns seriously. The move has the support of at least one good government group. The head of the League of Women Voters told the Dispatch the unit could bring even more comfort to Ohioans. Of course, fraud is very rare. LaRose has referred 77 cases of possible voter fraud to prosecutors. Millions of people vote in Ohio elections. 6 million people voted in 2020. Joe Mas, when you think of Secretary of State, you don't think of investigating. Does the Secretary of State have the authority, legal authority, to investigate fraud and these other issues?
They do, and or they will, and as a matter of fact, this is something that is very common in state agencies, where you could have investigators that represent, in fact, the Attorney General's office. They're Deputy Attorney General folks, and that's what's likely to happen here. Now, the interesting thing is that Rose wants to create this unit to give some comfort to people that his own party have made skeptical over the whole issue of election. So that's the one thing I have wrong. But anything the League of Women Voters says, I'm for. If they feel that this is going to give some comfort to some people that they're worried about, that's fine with me.
Mike, again, the timing. 6 weeks before the election. We've been talking about voter fraud since the day after the 2020 election. So it's been close to 2 years. Why not form this unit 18 months ago?
Well, again, there's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And my parting shot, I'm going to mention that something more. But Ohio Revised Code Section 3505.01N1 says the Secretary of State shall investigate frauds, irregularities, and other things. So it's already in the Revised Code. Unfortunately, our past Secretary of States have not done what LaRose is doing now. He's not creating anything. He's just doing his job what the Revised Code, the statutory responsibilities require him to do.
What are they going to do all day? There's 77 possible cases.
Okay, Mike, look, since 2020, there were 31 elections in the state of Ohio that were tied, ended in a tie. If there was any fraud in any of those 31, it would have disenfranchised thousands and thousands
of fraud.
Yeah, there is no fraud because we aggressively fight it, and we're on top of it. The 88 county boards of elections, our Secretary of State with this new unit now will have, look, our county prosecutors, I called 3 of them before taping the show today. Yeah. They're understaffed, they can't find attorneys, they don't want to work, they can't find investigators. So these county prosecutors that would have to prosecute this, it doesn't go to the front of the line when you have murders and other heinous crimes. So now the Secretary of State will do his job that the law requires and work with the AG and prosecutors.
You know, if they run out of fraud cases to investigate, because they plow through those 77 pretty quickly, if they're actually going to investigate problems with campaign funding and campaign finance, there might be some roadway there. Back a few years back, Clayton Luckey, a Democrat from Dayton, he diverted $130,000 out of his campaign account, and it went undetected by the Secretary of State's office because the Secretary of State does not have the authority to look at the underlying bank account records. It only got detected because another guy did some bad stuff, and the feds caught on to it and started pulling string and found out what Luckey was doing.
There's many more hijinks on that end of it rather than the people vote. Heck, we have enough trouble getting people to get out and to vote in the first place. It's not a matter of people coming out of the woodwork to vote illegally.
But you have to admit there's some politics here. Frank LaRose is trying to toe that line. He called Ohio's election in 2020 the most successful ever, but there are folks in his party who say it was rigged, not necessarily here, but other places. He can't come right out and say, that's all false, you're nuts, it wasn't rigged. He has to and this is part of that strategy, right?
Look, if we want to ensure integrity in our voting system, we have to be accountable. And he's just doing his job, Mike. The revised code that's passed by the legislature a decade ago said you shall investigate frauds.
Why didn't he do that in the first year of his first term then? Why right now?
I'm not sure. I don't know. That's a question for the Secretary of State. There's never the wrong time to do the right thing. So let's do it. It's innovative. It's something different. And I talked to Frank the other night at our Right to Life event, and he said Secretary of States across the country are calling him saying, hey, give us more information on what you're doing. This is a great idea.
Well, if it does lead to more confidence, that's a good thing, I guess, regardless of the timing. All right, time now for our weekly off-the-record final thoughts and parting shots. Joe Mas, you're up first.
Mike, in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, I would like to honor Ohioan Don Jose de Rivera Sanjurgo. He was a Spanish immigrant who in 1854 bought Ohio's Lake Erie Islands. And he established a variety of businesses, including vineyards, and is considered the father of Ohio's wine industry.
Interesting. Mike Gonidakis.
Just a friendly reminder that back in 2004, then Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner was the first election denier, not just in Ohio, but in the United States. She refused to accept the outcome of the presidential election that George Bush won. And what did she do? She went to all 88 counties with semi-trucks, collected all the paper ballots, took them to some secure location, and then scrutinized them. Look, at the end of the day, when I hear people talk about conspiracy theories and election denying, remember, it started here in Ohio with former Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner.
That was a very close election. And though not all Democrats questioned it. Anyway, Laura.
So we will not see a debate between Mike DeWine and Nan Whaley, despite wide support for debates. But the Ohio Debate Commission is going to be sponsoring one between Sharon Kennedy and Jennifer Brunner, and that will be October 23rd.
Right. Well, 80% in polls say they want debates. Well, now you got to watch them. Starts Monday night, the J.D. Vance, Tim Ryan debate, 7 o'clock on Monday evening. It'll be on TV here locally here in Columbus. So look for that. If you really want debates, now you got to watch them. And a reminder, our final reminder, next week we host a special live production of Columbus on the Record at our new headquarters here, the new WOSU headquarters. It is Friday, October 14th in the evening. Join me and our panel as we discuss the home stretch of the 2022 campaign and what this crucial election will mean for Ohio and the nation, all in front of a live studio audience. There'll be a Q&A session and a reception after the program, so you can heckle us. Visit wosu.org/events to buy tickets. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook and watch us anytime on your time at wosu.org and on the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.